Hey, it's Vaz here from Metro Hobbies and Aussie RC Playground. Today we're going to be talking about this beautiful aeroplane over here. This is the FMS Trojan T28 or T28 Trojan, however you want to say it. This is a 1.4 meter aircraft, and I thought I'll take a little bit of time and kind of give you a rundown on some of its features, how it comes equipped, and also give you a bit of a time lapse of the entire build of this aircraft because it actually goes together very, very quickly. Now the T28 actually comes pretty well set up out of the box for you to spend less time building and more time flying. Believe it or not, there's no glue on this aircraft whatsoever that you need to use to assemble it, and there's only 8 screws holding the entire thing together. There are 4 underneath the main wing, 2 for the horizontal stabilizer and 2 for the vertical stabilizer. Now I'm going to very quickly run you through the instructions and how you actually assemble this while showing you a bit of a time lapse of me putting the entire plane together. Now the instructions themselves are actually pretty well illustrated, and I followed everything to the T with the exception of one thing, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later on. Now, they also give you a couple of spare screws. So if you find yourself with some extra screws at the end of the build, don't freak out. As long as you've used 8 of them, you should be good to go. So if you've used 7, you've missed one somewhere, just to let you know. All right, so assembling this plane. You start off with the main wing. It's pretty straightforward. There are 2 spars that are included in the box. You slide them into one of your wings. You slide the other wing together. They slide together, and that's pretty much it. That's your main wing assembled. There are 2 little plastic covers that go on the front and rear of that wing, and that is where you put your screws through to secure it to the main fuselage. Very straightforward. Now towards the back you have the vertical stabilizer. That actually comes pre-assembled with the main fuse. You will need to remove that to install your horizontal stabilizer. So in order to remove it, I found that mine was a little bit stuck, and I did take a little bit of time and slide a metal ruler underneath just to pry it away from the main fuse. Obviously it got stuck there due to moisture and so forth from transportation, and you just need to very gently pull it apart. It's not secured with glue or any screws. It may just be a little bit stuck, so just take your time and use the tools that you have to pull that apart. Once that's away, you can then install your horizontal stabilizer, which actually keys in to the main fuse, and there are 2 screws holding that together. You then reattach your vertical stabilizer, which is your rudder. There are 2 screws underneath the fuse that attach to that, and away you go. Now at this point, the instructions do call for you to install the control rods for the elevator and the rudder. You can do that, but what I did is I actually installed my receiver and powered the aeroplane up to neutralize the servos for the rudder and the elevator, so that when I install my control rods, I've actually got my control surfaces perfectly level. So my elevator is completely horizontal and not pointing down or pointing up, and my rudder is completely straight. The way that you adjust that is by simply twisting the little ball end at the end of the control rod, and making sure that when you attach it to the I think control horn on the control surface, there's a lot of control words here, that it actually sits straight, and you're not going to do your maiden flight and all of a sudden have to go straight to your trims for your rudder or your elevator. So that's the idea behind that. Once you attach that control rod, the next really thing that you need to do is just go through the entire process and setup of your radio prior to installing your prop. Your prop should really be the last thing that you do after you have everything set up, all the switches are set up and everything is set up on your radio, because you don't want to accidentally hit the throttle and the plane takes off on you while you've got the prop on there. Make sure you get everything set up whilst the prop is off. Once that's done, you're pretty much ready and set to go. Now that is the overall assembly of the plane. It should take you no more than about 45 to an hour if you are quick enough. If you've done this sort of thing before, it should be pretty straightforward. You shouldn't really have any challenges here. It's all very, very simple. The instructions are actually very, very good, which I was quite impressed with. Now for batteries, this takes anything from a 2600 to say a mid 3000s, even high 3000 milliamp 4S battery. That's what it's really designed to take. You could possibly run a 2200 4S, but I'll probably only leave that for calm days because the lighter weight may find it a little bit trickier to penetrate the wind. I don't know, I haven't flown the aeroplane yet, but generally when you have a lighter aircraft, it's good for breezy days, I suppose, but when you do have a little bit of headwind, you want something with a bit more mass to be able to penetrate that wind. So I have no doubt this plane has plenty of power. I've seen some of the flight footage from other people, and this plane flies beautifully. power is not the issue, but of course going with a lighter battery, you're going to shorten your flight times. You're going to have probably to adjust where you position your battery as well for your CG. Speaking of which, CG on this aircraft I found to be pretty much on the second ridge line of your main wing. You will see it, you know, you'll know what I'm talking about when you actually see it. That's roughly about 80 to 85 millimeters from the leading edge of the wing. Now, as I said, I haven't flown the plane yet. I may need to adjust that after the first flight, maybe move the battery back a little bit, maybe move it forward. But the way where it's sitting at the moment, it seems to be fine. I personally am going to be using a 3300 milliamp 4S, which we will be stocking at Metro Hobbies as well. And that I think is going to work very, very well with this aircraft. But as I said, you can use slightly smaller, perhaps even slightly larger batteries as well, because the battery compartment is actually pretty generous. Now, as far as wiring everything up goes, just as before we close this off, the main wings have a couple of wires coming through, or they have a bunch of wires coming through. There's LED lights, there's flaps, there's servo wires for your ailerons, there's landing gear, so there's actually a lot of things going on. But what FMS have done to keep everything nice and simple is they've kind of joined it all into one plug that basically plugs into a power distribution board, I guess you would call it, where all the control servos plug into. So from there's servo leads about 20 centimeters long roughly, and those are the ones that plug into your receiver. They are all labeled, so it makes it really, really easy for you to plug into your receiver. You will need at least a 6-channel receiver to be able to operate this aircraft, because you've got LEDs, you've got flaps, you've got landing gear, all of these other things. So make sure you have a receiver with enough channels. You can probably get away with something a bit smaller, but you just won't have a flaps operational. You might have to sacrifice something. Otherwise, yeah, 6-channel at least. And if you want to, do anything else, you might want to get something with even more channels. So that plugs into your receiver. Everything's labeled, super easy to do. And then of course the rest of it is programming it on your radio. I'm not going to go through that because there's various different radios out there. This is a plug and play version. No point in going through that. You will need to learn that on your own. This plane, of course, is not really for beginners, although I'm sure it flies really well, and it's probably not the the most difficult plane to fly. You probably want to grab this one maybe on your 3rd or 4th aeroplane. If you've had several hours of experience, maybe with one aircraft that's got a pretty good skill envelope, pretty good flight envelope where you can fly it fairly docile and also be fairly acrobatic with it. Maybe this could be a second one, but ideally you'd want to have a couple of different types of airplanes under your belt, get a bit of experience to be able to fly something like this, because you don't want to ruin a perfectly beautiful airplane that could eventually have a fairly short flight because of your lack of experience. So just keep that in mind. Other than that, you might want to maybe get a receiver with stabilizer in it or something like that to help you out. This has a 70 amp ESC. It's got a great beefy motor up here. The prop, of course, you need to assemble yourself as well. And as I said, you leave that one till last. The landing gear also has suspension, which is something that I've never had on an aircraft before. And yes, this is my own personal aircraft. We have been selling this one at Metro Hobbies now for a few months, and I've decided to grab one for myself, and I figured why not take the opportunity and actually show you all how it goes together, talk to you about it a little bit, and just give you some little hints and tips on how to put everything together. Wire management in the fuselage, I'll give you a close-up of that as well, because FMS did actually do a pretty good job, but I kind of like to tidy it up my own way, so I used some zip ties, a little bit of tape to keep the wiring away from the main battery tray compartment in the middle. And that's it, the plane is ready to fly. So stay tuned, I will have a maiden flight coming up in the very near future, hopefully when the weather gets a little bit better and I'm able to get out there and do a maiden flight. I'll be showing you and sharing my thoughts of how this guy flies in the air. But for now, that is it from me. Thank you all very much for watching. Don't forget to check out the video description. I'll have a link in there for this particular plane, as well as links to the entire FMS range that we are carrying at Metro Hobbies. Don't forget to hit that like button, share the video if you find it to be helpful for somebody else. Thank you again for watching, and I'll speak to you all next time.